The jarring ring of the phone jolted me awake at 2 a.m. Groggily, I fumbled for the receiver, my heart pounding with a sense of dread. Late-night calls never brought good news. "Hello?" I croaked, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "Viv, it's me, Shane." The familiar voice of my estranged brother sent a chill down my spine. We hadn't spoken in years, not since our falling out over his reckless lifestyle choices. "What do you want, Shane? It's the middle of the night." There was a pregnant pause before he responded, his tone laced with uncharacteristic desperation. "I need you to take Ellie." "What? Take Ellie? Your daughter?" I sat upright, confusion and anger swirling within me. "Yeah, I can't take care of her anymore. I'm a mess, Viv. Please, she needs a stable home." Before I could protest, the doorbell rang, echoing through the silence of my apartment. With shaky steps, I made my way to the front door and peered through the peephole. There stood a small figure, clutching a worn backpack. Ellie, my 9-year-old niece whom I hadn't seen in years. Throwing open the door, I stared at her in disbelief. She looked up at me with those big, soulful eyes, a mixture of fear and relief etched across her delicate features. "Uncle Shane said I have to stay with you now," she whispered, her voice trembling. In that moment, my world shifted on its axis. The weight of Shane's abandonment crashed down on me, leaving me reeling. How could he do this? How could he simply discard his own child like a burden too heavy to bear? Wordlessly, I ushered Ellie inside, my mind racing with a million questions. As I guided her to the guest room, I couldn't help but notice the haunted look in her eyes. A look no child should ever possess. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the gravity of the situation settled upon me like a suffocating weight. My brother, once the golden child of our family, had hit rock bottom. And in his descent, he had dragged his innocent daughter down with him, thrusting her into my ill-prepared arms. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would test the depths of my resilience and reveal the true power of familial bonds, both forged and broken. The first few days with Ellie were a whirlwind of chaos and confusion. As a career-driven woman with no children of my own, I found myself completely out of my depth. Simple tasks like preparing meals or helping with homework became monumental challenges. Ellie, bless her heart, tried her best to adapt to her new surroundings, but I could see the fear and uncertainty lurking behind her brave facade. The weight of her father's abandonment hung heavy over us both. It wasn't until our first visit to Ellie's pediatrician that the true gravity of Shane's negligence came crashing down on me. "Miss Harper," the doctor began, her brow furrowed with concern, "Ellie's medical records indicate that she has been diagnosed with a neurological condition that requires regular monitoring and treatment." I felt the blood drain from my face as I turned to look at Ellie, who sat silently clutching her worn stuffed bear. How could Shane have kept something so serious from me? "But I had no idea," I stammered, my hands trembling. "Shane never mentioned anything about this." The doctor's expression hardened. "Unfortunately, the records show that Ellie has missed several crucial follow-up appointments and treatments over the past year." A wave of anger washed over me, hot and consuming. Shane's irresponsibility knew no bounds. He had not only abandoned his daughter emotionally, but had also jeopardized her health and well-being. As we left the doctor's office, Ellie reached up and took my hand, her small fingers intertwining with mine. "I'm sorry, Aunt Viv," she whispered, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. In that moment, my heart broke for this sweet, innocent child who had been so cruelly betrayed by the one person who should have protected her above all else. "You have nothing to be sorry for, sweetheart," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "I promise, from now on, I'm going to take care of you, no matter what." Over the next few weeks, my life became a whirlwind of medical appointments, therapy sessions, and meetings with Ellie's teachers. I juggled my demanding job with my newfound parental responsibilities, running on pure adrenaline and sheer determination. Shane's sporadic phone calls and erratic messages only added to the chaos. One minute, he would be apologetic and pleading for forgiveness. The next, he would lash out with accusations and threats, his words dripping with venom. But through it all, Ellie remained my beacon of strength. Her bright smile and infectious laughter reminded me of the truly important things in life, the things Shane had so carelessly cast aside in his downward spiral. As I watched Ellie blossom under my care, a fierce protectiveness took root within me. I would not allow Shane's toxicity to poison her life any further. If he dared to try and wrest her away from the stability I had fought so hard to provide, I would fight back with every ounce of my being. Little did I know, the battle lines were already being drawn, and Shane's true colors were about to be revealed in the most explosive of ways. As the weeks passed, Ellie and I settled into a comfortable routine. Her infectious energy breathed new life into my once orderly existence, and I found myself bonding with her in ways I never thought possible. Her sharp wit and insatiable curiosity kept me on my toes, challenging me to see the world through her inquisitive eyes. Our evenings were filled with laughter and conversations that ranged from the profound to the delightfully absurd. "Aunt Viv, why do clouds look like cotton candy?" Ellie would ask, her eyes wide with wonder. "Well, you see, they're made up of tiny water droplets that scatter the sunlight," I'd explain, trying my best to simplify the scientific concepts. "But why can't we eat them?" "That's just mean," she'd pout, her brow furrowed in mock indignation. These moments of pure, unadulterated joy became the highlights of my day, a welcome reprieve from the stress of juggling work and Ellie's medical needs. Of course, Shane's presence lingered like a dark cloud, constantly threatening to rain on our newfound happiness. His phone calls grew increasingly erratic, ranging from tearful apologies to venomous tirades. "You have no right to keep my daughter from me," he'd snarl, his words slurring from what I suspected was substance abuse. "Your daughter," I'd retort, my voice laced with icy contempt. "When was the last time you acted like a father, Shane? When was the last time you put Ellie's needs before your own selfish desires?" The line would go silent, save for the sound of his ragged breathing. In those moments, I could almost hear the wheels turning in his twisted mind, plotting his next move. But Ellie remained my focus, my guiding light through the storm of Shane's chaos. I poured my energy into ensuring her medical needs were met, her education was prioritized, and her emotional well-being was nurtured. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to see the weight of her past lift from her shoulders. The haunted look in her eyes faded, replaced by a spark of joy and wonder that warmed my heart. "I love you, Aunt Viv," she'd whisper as I tucked her into bed each night, her small arms wrapping around my neck in a gentle embrace. Those 4 simple words held more power than any of Shane's vicious outbursts. They were a reminder of the unbreakable bond we had forged, a bond that transcended blood and circumstance. As the months rolled by, Ellie's progress became undeniable. Her health improved, her grades soared, and her confidence blossomed. It was as if she had been a delicate flower, finally given the nurturing environment she needed to thrive. And with each milestone, my resolve to protect her from Shane's toxicity grew stronger. I would not allow his selfish desires to uproot the life we had so carefully cultivated. Little did I know, however, that Shane's desperation was about to reach a boiling point, unleashing a chain of events that would test the limits of my strength and resilience in ways I could never have imagined. It started with a barrage of missed calls and increasingly frantic voicemails. Shane's voice, laced with desperation, echoed through the tiny speaker of my phone. "Viv, I need to talk to you. It's important. Please, just hear me out. I'm in trouble. You have to give Ellie back to me. She's my daughter." At first, I ignored his pleas, too consumed with the daily routine of work and caring for Ellie, but when the messages took on a more sinister tone, I knew I couldn't sweep them under the rug any longer. "If you don't return Ellie to me, I'll have no choice but to take legal action," Shane snarled, his words dripping with venom. "You're holding her against my will, and I won't stand for it." A cold chill ran down my spine as I replayed the message. Shane's threats were no longer the empty ramblings of a desperate man. They carried a weight of intent that chilled me to the bone. I knew I had to protect Ellie at all costs, even if it meant facing Shane head-on. The next day, as I dropped Ellie off at school, Shane ambushed us in the parking lot. His unkempt appearance and bloodshot eyes were a stark reminder of how far he had fallen. "Viv, we need to talk," he slurred, his breath reeking of stale alcohol. "Not now, Shane," I replied firmly, ushering Ellie towards the school entrance. "I'm dropping Ellie off, and then I have to get to work." "No, you don't understand," he shouted, grabbing my arm with surprising force. I need money, and I need it now. If you don't give it to me, I'll take Ellie back, and you'll never see her again." Ellie whimpered, her small body trembling as she clung to my side. In that moment, my protective instincts kicked into overdrive. "Don't you dare threaten us, Shane," I spat, wrenching my arm from his grasp. "Ellie is safe and happy with me, something you clearly can't provide her. If you try to take her away, I'll fight you with everything I have." Shane's eyes narrowed, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the glimmer of the man he used to be, the protective older brother who had once sworn to keep me safe. But just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. "You'll regret this, Viv," he hissed. "Mark my words." As he stormed off, I pulled Ellie close, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew then that the battle lines had been drawn, and there was no turning back. Shane's threats were no longer just idle words. They were a declaration of war, and I would have to fight with every ounce of strength I possessed to protect the precious life that had become the center of my world. In the days following Shane's explosive confrontation, I found myself constantly on edge, jumping at every sudden noise or unexpected phone call. The weight of his threats hung heavy over me, casting a dark shadow on the life Ellie and I had so carefully built. But I refused to let fear dictate my actions. If Shane wanted a fight, I would be ready, armed with the truth and unwavering determination to protect Ellie at all costs. I began digging into Shane's past, piecing together the breadcrumbs of his descent into chaos. What I uncovered chilled me to the bone. It seemed his erratic behavior and financial desperation were merely the tip of a much larger iceberg. Through a web of shady business dealings and fraudulent schemes, Shane had accumulated a staggering amount of debt, leaving a trail of broken promises and burned bridges in his wake. As I delved deeper, I unearthed a disturbing pattern. Shane had a penchant for manipulating those closest to him, exploiting their trust and draining them of every last resource before moving on to his next victim. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Shane's sudden interest in regaining custody of Ellie wasn't born out of paternal love or concern for her well-being. It was a desperate ploy, a last-ditch effort to secure a source of income or leverage against me. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I wasted no time in fortifying my defenses. I hired a skilled attorney, a tenacious bulldog of a woman who promised to fight tooth and nail to ensure Ellie's safety and security. "We'll bury him in evidence," she vowed, her steely gaze matching the determination in her voice. "He won't know what hit him." With each passing day, the momentum shifted in our favor. Ellie's medical records, meticulously documented by her dedicated team of doctors and therapists, painted a damning picture of Shane's neglect and indifference towards her well-being. Statements from his former partners and business associates further solidified our case, revealing a pattern of manipulation and deceit that stretched back years. As the evidence mounted, Shane's calls and threats grew increasingly desperate, his once venomous words dissolving into pathetic pleas for mercy. "Viv, please, you have to help me," he'd sob, his voice a mere shadow of its former bravado. "I'm in over my head, and they're coming for me." But I remained steadfast, my resolve unwavering. This was the path Shane had chosen, and he would have to face the consequences of his actions, no matter how painful or dire. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. As I strode into the courthouse, Ellie's small hand clasped tightly in mine, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the moment when justice would be served, and Shane's web of lies would unravel before his very eyes. Little did I know the true confrontation was yet to come, and it would test the depths of my strength in ways I never could have imagined. The day started like any other, a flurry of activity as I rushed to get Ellie ready for school and myself prepared for another demanding day at the office. But little did I know, the calm before the storm was about to give way to a tempest of epic proportions. As I settled into my desk, my phone buzzed with an urgent message from the building's security team. "Mr. Harper is in the lobby, causing a disturbance. Should we call the authorities?" A chill ran down my spine as I realized they were referring to Shane. Without a moment's hesitation, I instructed them to handle the situation discreetly, not wanting to draw any unnecessary attention or alarm Ellie, who was safely ensconced in her classroom. But as I stepped out of the elevator and into the main lobby, the scene that unfolded before me was straight out of a nightmare. There, in the midst of the bustling corporate hustle, stood Shane, disheveled, wild-eyed, and ranting incoherently. His clothes were rumpled, and the stench of stale alcohol clung to him like a noxious cloud. "Vivian!" he bellowed, his voice slurring as he swayed precariously on his feet. "You think you can take everything from me and get away with it?" The lobby fell silent, all eyes fixed on the spectacle unfolding before them. I could feel the weight of their scrutiny, the whispers and judgments already taking shape. "Shane, please," I pleaded, trying to maintain a veneer of composure. "This isn't the way to handle this. Let's talk about this privately." But my words seemed to fall on deaf ears as Shane's tirade escalated, his volatile emotions spilling over like a dam bursting. "You're nothing but a self-righteous bitch," he spat, his eyes burning with a hatred I had never seen before. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Well, guess what? You're just as messed up as the rest of us." With each venomous proclamation, I felt a piece of my carefully constructed facade crumble away, exposing the raw vulnerability that lay beneath. Shane's words cut deeper than any physical wound, reopening old scars and dredging up insecurities I thought I had long since buried. But then something shifted within me. A spark of defiance ignited, fueled by the newfound strength I had discovered in my role as Ellie's protector. "You're right, Shane," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "I am better than you, because unlike you, I've chosen to take responsibility for my actions and put someone else's well-being before my own selfish desires." Shane recoiled as if struck, his mouth agape in stunned silence. In that moment, I knew I had struck a nerve, piercing through his bravado and exposing the fragile, broken man beneath. "That's why Ellie will never be yours again," I continued, emboldened by my own words. "She deserves a stable home, a loving environment, something you've proven time and again that you're incapable of providing." The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the sound of Shane's ragged breathing. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of recognition in his eyes, a fleeting acknowledgement of the truth that lay behind my words. But just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by a mask of defiance and bitter resentment. "You'll pay for this, Viv," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "Mark my words." As he stormed out of the lobby, the spell was broken, and the world around me seemed to snap back into focus. But even as the whispers and stares resumed, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. In that moment, I knew that I had won a pivotal battle, not just against Shane, but against the demons of self-doubt and insecurity that had plagued me for so long. And as I returned to my desk, my resolve steeled and my spirit invigorated, I knew that the war was far from over. But for the first time, I felt truly prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that I was fighting for something greater than myself. The love and well-being of the precious child who had become the center of my world. In the aftermath of Shane's explosive meltdown, I found myself walking on eggshells, constantly bracing for his next erratic outburst. But as the weeks ticked by without incident, a fragile sense of normalcy began to settle over our lives once more. That is, until the fateful day of our family gathering, a yearly tradition that had once been a joyous occasion, full of laughter and cherished memories. This time, however, the air was thick with tension, the shadow of Shane's misdeeds looming over us like a dark cloud. As I stepped through the doors, Ellie's small hand clasped tightly in mine. I could feel the weight of 1,000 unspoken words pressing down upon me. My parents' eyes were filled with a mixture of concern and disappointment, their once unwavering faith in their golden child now shaken to its core. But it was the sight of Shane, slouched in the corner of the room, that truly took my breath away. His disheveled appearance and hollow stare were a far cry from the vibrant, charismatic brother I had once idolized. As the afternoon wore on, the atmosphere grew increasingly stifling, the forced small talk and plastered-on smiles doing little to mask the elephant in the room. It was clear that something had to give, and I knew deep down that it would fall upon me to break the cycle of denial and deception that had plagued our family for far too long. So, with a deep breath and a steely resolve, I rose to my feet, the weight of the evidence I had gathered burning a hole in my pocket. I think it's time we address the elephant in the room, I began, my voice cutting through the uneasy silence like a knife. Shane, your actions over the past few years have been nothing short of reprehensible. A collective gasp rippled through the room, but I pressed on, undeterred. You abandoned your child, neglected her well-being, and exploited those closest to you for your own selfish gain. I continued, my words laced with a righteous fury that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. Shane's eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. But before he could muster a defense, I pulled out the stack of medical records, financial statements, and sworn affidavits, a damning collection of evidence that laid bare the true extent of his deceit. These documents paint a clear picture of the man you've become, I said, my voice steady and unwavering. A man driven by greed, selfishness, and a complete disregard for the well-being of those who should have mattered most. As I methodically laid out the facts, the room fell into a deafening silence, save for the occasional muffled sob or sharp intake of breath. Shane, for once, was rendered speechless, his usual bravado stripped away to reveal the hollow shell of a man beneath. You have two choices, Shane, I concluded, my gaze fixed upon his downcast eyes. You can continue down this path of self-destruction, alienating those who once loved you and squandering what little dignity you have left. Or you can take responsibility for your actions, seek the help you so desperately need, and perhaps one day earn back the trust you have so carelessly betrayed. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. And then, in a moment that will forever be seared into my memory, Shane lifted his head, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. You're right, Viv, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I've hit rock bottom, and I have no one to blame but myself. In that instant, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders, as if the years of pent-up frustration and anguish had finally found release. I had laid bare the truth, exposed the demons that had threatened to tear our family apart, and emerged victorious. As I looked around the room, I saw a flicker of hope in the eyes of my loved ones. A glimmer of possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, we could begin to heal the wounds that had been inflicted upon us. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I possessed the strength and resilience to face them head-on, fortified by the knowledge that I had fought for what truly mattered, the love and well-being of the precious child who had become the beating heart of my world. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change and growth, both for Ellie and myself. With Shane's shadow finally lifted, we were free to embrace the future with open arms, unburdened by the weight of his toxic presence. The legal proceedings were swift and decisive, with the mountain of evidence I had compiled leaving little room for doubt. Shane, faced with the stark reality of his misdeeds, had little choice but to relinquish his parental rights, clearing the path for me to officially adopt Ellie as my own. The day we stood before the judge, hand in hand, was one I will never forget. Ellie's eyes shone with a mixture of hope and trepidation, her small frame trembling ever so slightly as the weight of the moment settled upon her. But as the judge's gavel fell, sealing our fates as mother and daughter, a radiant smile spread across Ellie's face, and in that instant, I knew that we had both found the missing piece to our fractured lives. I love you, Mom, she whispered, her arms wrapping around me in a fierce embrace. Those 3 simple words held more power than 1,000 legal documents, more weight than any courtroom decree. They were a testament to the unbreakable bond we had forged, a bond that had been tempered in the fires of adversity and emerged stronger than ever before. In the weeks that followed, we settled into our new normal, each day bringing with it a sense of joy and wonder that had been sorely lacking in our lives for far too long. Ellie thrived in her new stable environment, her once haunted eyes sparkling with a newfound zest for life. Her academic performance soared, and her medical conditions, once so precariously neglected, became a mere footnote in our daily routine, meticulously managed and monitored with the utmost care and attention. And through it all, I found myself evolving in ways I never could have imagined. The once-driven career woman who had placed such value on material success and achievement now found her greatest joy in the simple pleasures of motherhood. tucking Ellie into bed at night, helping her with her homework, and reveling in the pure, unfiltered laughter that seemed to fill every corner of our home. Of course, the specter of Shane's misdeeds still lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness we had overcome. But rather than letting it consume us, we chose to embrace it as a lesson, a cautionary tale of what happens when one's moral compass becomes hopelessly skewed. News of Shane's legal troubles and financial ruin trickled in like a slow, steady drip, each revelation more damning than the last. But as I watched him face the consequences of his actions, I felt no sense of vindication or triumph, only a profound sadness for the man he had become and the opportunities he had squandered. In the end, perhaps that was the true karmic justice, not the legal penalties or financial ruin, but the realization that Shane had lost something far more precious than material wealth, the love and trust of those who had once been his biggest supporters. As for Ellie and me, our journey was just beginning. With each passing day, our bond grew deeper, our love more resolute, and our appreciation for the gift we had been given more profound. And as I watched Ellie blossom into a confident, compassionate young woman, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and gratitude for the unexpected path that had led us to this moment. For it was in the midst of chaos and adversity that I had discovered my true calling, and in the process, found the courage to embrace a love more powerful than any force on earth.
It surprises me. I never thought a bottom feeder like you would be eating at such a fancy restaurant. At the restaurant, I happened to run into Marcus, who heads the department for one of our biggest clients. My older brother, Ryan, who was 10 years my senior, was taking me out to dinner for my birthday. Marcus was the type of person who always treated me with contempt and spoke in the most demeaning terms. I just smiled politely at him because I was used to it, but Ryan spoke out right away. Jordan's older brother is me. We came over for supper because it's his birthday today. I appreciate you always taking care of him. Ryan greeted him politely, but Marcus scowled and remarked, I see. Jordan's big brother obviously splurged on him because he couldn't have afforded such a property with his own income. But really, isn't it a bit excessive to spend this much money on your younger brother, even if it is his birthday? If you're Jordan's brother, you're probably not all that superior to him. You're older now, and I doubt you're earning a lot of money, aren't you? Hearing my brother mocked infuriated me, even though I was accustomed to being humiliated myself. I yelled, Marcus, I don't care if you look down on me, before I could stop myself. I'm accustomed to it, but you can't insult my brother, whom I greatly admire, and I won't put up with it. Leave now, please. Marcus's expression contorted in rage as soon as I said that, and I knew I had made a mistake. Usually, I would dismiss his comments with a blank stare, but this time, with my brother in the picture, I became angry. However, it was too late. Marcus laughed softly and added, Oh, so you dare speak to me like that, Jordan? In the most threatening voice I'd ever heard him use. You truly don't know who you're playing with. In a panic, I briefly considered getting down on my knees and pleading, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. However, I couldn't help but believe that I wasn't at fault, so I glared at Marcus instead of apologizing. Kneel and apologize, Jordan, Marcus snarled, sneering down at me. Consider how amusing it would be to witness someone groveling in such a posh establishment. Make a favorable impression on the other patrons. I glared at him even more and refused to apologize. Marcus smirked and continued, If you won't apologize. All of a sudden, he swung the pricey cognac he was holding and threw its contents straight at Ryan's face before I could react. Whoa! Ryan yelled uncontrollably. I was stunned. What the devil are you doing? Wait. Do you have a breakdown? Flustered by Marcus's ludicrous actions, I demanded. You're quite bold to respond to me. Get down on your knees now. You'd better follow my advice if you don't want to lose your job. Marcus gave a bark. However, Ryan calmly replied, Wow, as he wiped the dripping booze off his face. I'm genuinely in awe I must say. In my 37 years of life, I've seen a lot, but I never thought I'd get a pricey bottle of cognac poured all over my face. I may be the only person in the world to have ever enjoyed this luxury. It's somewhat of an honor, to be honest. The cost of this drink alone is thousands of dollars, or even tens of thousands. It's similar to receiving a cash shower. What an opulent experience. His reaction was so unexpectedly cheerful that I nearly burst out laughing. The only one who wasn't amused was Marcus. What the hell? Is Jordan's brother insane? You two are both absolute morons. Marcus spat out, clearly thrown off. Then Ryan turned to me and said, Jordan, I know you wouldn't do this, but just in case, you don't have to apologize to this guy, all right? Marcus scowled and scoffed. Your brother is just as arrogant as you, but that's fine. If you refuse to apologize, I don't care. I'll simply cut off all business with your company. Without our partnership, your company will probably go under. And when that happens, Jordan, you'll have to take responsibility and resign. No, actually, you'll be fired on the spot. Hell, the whole company might collapse. Either way, you're out of a job. Marcus laughed maliciously, clearly enjoying himself. At that moment, Kenneth, the restaurant owner who had noticed the commotion, walked over with a towel for my brother to wipe his face. Then, Mr. Kirkland of Kirkland Corporation, who had been sitting at the table with Marcus, also noticed the commotion and walked over to our table. Surrounded by various people, Marcus said, Ha! Everyone's watching, Jordan. You just disrespected an important business partner. You're fired. Watching Marcus laughing gleefully, I didn't miss the cold stares from both Kenneth and Mr. Kirkland. Only my brother seemed to be genuinely enjoying the situation, grinning from ear to ear. Now that I fully grasped the situation, I confidently said, You're the one who's getting fired first. Marcus's eyes widened in shock, and then the surprising truth was revealed. My name is Jordan. I'm a 27-year-old sales representative at a manufacturing company. My job is going fairly well, and I consider myself lucky to work in a friendly and supportive environment. Jordan, starting next month, you'll be taking over the Kirkland Corporation account. It's a big one, so do your best. One day, my senior colleague Kyle told me. Understood. Kirkland Corporation is one of our biggest clients, right? I'll do my best to handle the account as smoothly as you have. I responded enthusiastically, determined to meet expectations. But then Kyle continued, looking a bit apologetic. Actually, they've switched their representative on their end too. Until recently, a woman named Hannah was in charge, but they just reassigned someone named Marcus. I met him the other day, and he's quite the character. He straight up told me, You're boring. Get a younger guy to handle our account. I mean, I'm only in my late 30s, but I guess I'm not young enough for him anymore. So I talked to our president, Mr. Turner, and he said, Then let's have Jordan take over. I had thought my skills had earned me the responsibility of handling a major client, but knowing the real reason behind it left me a little disappointed. Still, it was the president's decision, so I had no choice but to rise to the challenge. Understood. I'll do my best to earn Marcus's approval, I answered, using the words to motivate myself. I've dealt with difficult clients before, and in the business world, you meet all kinds of people. Gaining more experience helps me grow, so I decided to stay calm and take on the responsibility. I officially took over the Kirkland Corporation account after receiving a full briefing from Kyle. I had some urgent matters to confirm with our new contact, so I called Marcus as a way to introduce myself. Hello, this is Jordan from Turner Corporation's sales department. Is Marcus available? When I called the company and asked that, the man on the other end of the line said, I'm Marcus. Since first impressions are crucial, I put on my most energetic and professional tone. Hi, Marcus. I'm Jordan, and I'll be handling your account from now on. I'll do my best to serve you well, so I look forward to working with you. Then he responded, "Hemph. Young guys are so loud and full of energy. I would have preferred someone calmer." But Kyle, the previous account manager, told me Marcus asked for a younger person to handle our account. I couldn't help but wonder, he's saying the complete opposite. Still, I couldn't afford to falter now. My apologies. I'll make an effort to be more composed. I appreciate your guidance moving forward, I replied, adjusting my tone to be calmer yet still polite. Then Marcus said, "Hemph. I don't really care. But young guys are more fun to push around." I started to understand him. I see, he's the type who always has a comeback for everything. Definitely a troublesome person. I braced myself, determined to handle him professionally, and ended the call on a positive note. "Kyle, you weren't kidding. Marcus is quite the handful," I reported back to Kyle, who was still nearby. "Sorry, Jordan. I really dumped a troublesome client on you," Kyle apologized, looking guilty. "It's not your fault at all," I reassured him. I was surrounded by great colleagues, so even if some clients were difficult, I felt I could handle it. My interactions with the contradictory and capricious Marcus were never easy, but somehow I managed to keep things running smoothly without angering him. Because of that, both Kyle and our president, Mr. Turner, began to recognize my efforts. "Jordan, I'm glad we assigned you to this account. I actually heard that Marcus had conflicts with other companies before, so I was a bit worried when he took over. But thanks to you, things are running smoothly. Honestly, if a major client like Kirkland Corporation were to cut ties with us, we'd be in serious trouble," Mr. Turner told me. "Thank you. So far, I've been managing somehow. I'll keep doing my best," I responded to Mr. Turner. That day, after a long and busy day at work, I finally headed home. As I stepped off the train at my station, my phone rang. Who could it be? I glanced at the caller ID. Ryan. It was my brother. "Hello." "Hey, Ryan." When I answered the phone, I heard Ryan's cheerful voice on the other end. "How have you been? Tomorrow's Jordan's birthday, right? I thought I'd give you a call to see if you're free for a meal." There's quite an age gap between Ryan and me, 10 years, to be exact. My father, Mark, had been married twice, so Ryan and I are half-siblings. Ryan's mother is a woman named Rachel. She was my father's first wife, but my father had a short temper and would immediately yell at or corner his wife whenever he was displeased. Rachel, unable to endure the emotional abuse, eventually left the house. At that time, Ryan was 7 years old. In most cases, when a child is that young, they usually go with their mother. Naturally, Rachel tried to take my brother with her, but my father said, "Ryan is intelligent and a capable son. He has value. He belongs to me, so leave him behind." Desperate not to be separated from her son, Rachel initially tried to stay and make the marriage work, but my father was relentless. "You're an eyesore. Get out of here. I'll take care of the divorce papers," he told her, forcing her out of the house. Of course, Ryan didn't want to be separated from his mother either. He cried and begged my father, but his pleas were ignored. The following year, my father remarried my mother, Marie. It still amazed me that such a terrible man managed to remarry, but my father came from a wealthy family. Through family connections, he was constantly presented with arranged marriage opportunities. Wealthy, sheltered women, completely unaware of his true nature, ended up marrying him. Both Rachel and Ryan were raised in privileged households with little experience with men. On top of that, my father was very good at maintaining a charming facade, making himself seem like a perfect man. To make matters worse, he was also considered good-looking. In short, two naive, sheltered women were completely deceived by my father, a wealthy man with a pleasant exterior. The year after my parents got married, I was born. At that time, Ryan was 10 years old. According to Ryan, after experiencing one divorce, My father seemed to have learned his lesson, at least a little, and treated my mother better than he had treated Rachel. Additionally, my mother had a bright and carefree personality. Even when my father did or said terrible things, she wouldn't dwell on them, and would wake up the next morning as if nothing had happened. This likely helped her cope. That's why my parents' marriage, despite some arguments, managed to last for 13 years. But to put it another way, it only lasted 10. When I was 13, my parents separated for the same reason my father had divorced Rachel. My father grew dissatisfied with my mother and escalated his verbal abuse until she was ultimately forced out. However, there was one key difference this time. My father did not demand to keep his son. I still remember that day vividly. My father screamed at my mother to leave. My mother was in tears. Then my father said, "This one isn't like Ryan. He's useless. He has no value. Take him with you." Of course, this one referred to me. Unlike my brother, I wasn't particularly good at studying or naturally skilled at many things. Apparently, that made me unworthy in my father's eyes. A normal person would probably be deeply hurt to hear something like that from their own father. But since the man had been a villain my entire life, I felt bad but not devastated. I had simply grown numb to it. Looking at Ryan, I sometimes wonder if it was a miracle that he grew up to be such a kind, sincere, and hard-working person, or if he turned out that way because our father served as the perfect example of what not to be. Either way, the fact that neither of us ended up as complete social misfits is something I feel genuinely grateful for. Anyway, back to the story. At 13, I left the house with my mother. At the time, Ryan was 23, and shortly after we left, he moved out on his own as well. My mother worked hard to raise me on her own. We weren't well off, but after escaping my father's tyranny, I felt peace and relief living alone with my mother. Looking back, those days were the happiest time of my life. Why was it only for a short time? Because soon after, my mother fell ill and passed away. She died just 1 year after divorcing my father. She had been feeling like she was getting headaches more often. Then, one day, she collapsed at home and never woke up again. At the time, I was still in middle school. My heart shattered, and I stopped going to school altogether. But before I had a chance to spiral completely, Ryan reached out his hand. "Jordan, come live with me. I'll take care of you." He wasted no time handling the paperwork to terminate my mother's apartment lease and took me in. By then, Ryan had already graduated from college and was working. He had a decent income for his age, so we weren't struggling financially. On top of that, he was surprisingly good at household chores, which made me respect him even more. I didn't want to just rely on him, so I tried to help with housework. But whenever I did too much, Ryan would say, "You have school to focus on, Jordan. Just do what you can." Thanks to Ryan, I always had proper meals while growing up, and I was able to attend both high school and college. Even when I was struggling with friendships, relationships, or academics during my teenage years, Ryan was always there to listen and support me. He was like a father, a mother, and a brother all in one. At times, he even felt like my best friend. I believe the only reason that was possible was because Ryan was extremely capable and skilled, and because he was a kind, compassionate person. I respect Ryan more than anyone else in the world. 3 years ago, we started living separately. It wasn't because we had a falling out or anything like that. I just felt that I couldn't rely on him forever and needed to become independent, so I moved out on my own. Even so, Ryan never stopped looking out for me. Every year on my birthday, he calls me. If our schedules align, he takes me out for drinks or treats me to a nice meal at a good restaurant. When he asked if I was free tomorrow for dinner, I immediately responded, "I'm free. Let's go," without a second thought. Ryan chuckled over the phone and said, "I'm glad you're free and that we can meet up. But I can't help but worry that you're always available at night. It's about time you got a girlfriend. But we can talk about that tomorrow. Let me know if you have a restaurant in mind." Then he hung up. Feeling excited, I looked forward to tomorrow. The next day, I finished work quickly and headed to the restaurant where I was meeting Ryan. It was the kind of place I wouldn't normally be able to afford on my own, but Ryan treated me to an amazing meal. Thanks for everything, as always. Honestly, I feel like I've been way too lucky compared to others my age. Is that really okay? I muttered, sipping wine that paired perfectly with the food. Ryan smiled and said, "Jordan, you had a tough childhood. You went through a lifetime's worth of hardship back then, so now you should feel free to enjoy as much happiness as you want. But that applies to you too, doesn't it? It wasn't just me. Didn't you also endure Dad's yelling and watch Mom cry growing up?" I wanted to acknowledge everything he had gone through too. He gave a wry smile and said, "Yeah, well, that's true." Wanting to hear more about his life lately, I asked, "So, how have things been for you recently?" That's when he brought up something unexpected. "Speaking of which, last week was Mother's Day, right? I sent flowers to my birth mother, and she called to thank me." Every year, Ryan sent gifts to Rachel on Mother's Day and her birthday. After all, it wasn't like he had chosen to be separated from her, and he always said he wanted to show appreciation while he still could. I respected him for always being thoughtful toward others. Then he continued, "And guess what? She's getting remarried." I was a bit surprised and asked, "Remarriage? You mean Rachel?" Ryan simply replied, "Yeah." At that moment, I wondered, was he happy about it, or did he have mixed feelings about his mother marrying a man he didn't know? Then I reconsidered. Knowing my brother, it was definitely the former. I feel relieved, honestly. Ever since she was kicked out by Dad, I always worried about whether she was really okay on her own. When I moved out of the family home, I considered living with her, but she told me, "I've been living alone all this time, and I'm doing just fine, so don't worry." And well, since I knew I might get married someday too, I figured I didn't have to force it. But still, aging alone is tough, and I couldn't help but worry. I knew she'd been dating a kind man 5 years younger than her for the past 3 years, and now she's finally decided to marry him. I'm really happy for her. He smiled brightly as he said that. Just as I had thought, he was genuinely happy. I had never met Rachel, but even I felt happy for her. Then Ryan suddenly paused and said, "Wait, I'm sorry. Talking about my mom like this must be insensitive, considering you lost yours." I quickly shook my head. "Why are you apologizing? I'm really happy to hear this. I mean it, I swear. My mom always asks about you whenever we talk. She's really fond of you, Jordan. She always asks, 'How's Jordan doing? Is he doing okay?' She even told me to let you know that if you ever need anything, you can count on her as a mother figure." Ryan said that and smiled. Hearing that filled my heart with warmth. The people around my brother were always kind-hearted, and I was sure it was because he himself was such an exceptional person. His kindness naturally attracted good people. At that moment, "Ryan, you actually came. It's been so long. You're looking great." A cheerful voice called out to us. Looking up, I saw a man around my brother's age, a staff member at the restaurant. "Kenneth, glad to see you. I figured if I called ahead, you'd feel obligated, so I just showed up instead," Ryan said to him. Ryan introduced him to me, saying, "Jordan, this is Kenneth, one of my old classmates. He owns this place." Then, turning to Kenneth, he said, "Kenneth, this is my younger brother." Handsome guy, right? I had assumed Kenneth was just a staff member, so I was surprised to learn he was actually the owner. Kenneth smiled warmly and said, "So you're Ryan's younger brother? It's an honor to meet you. Please enjoy your time here tonight." He gave a polite bow. Flustered, I stammered, "Oh, the honor is mine." Seeing my reaction, Ryan chuckled and said, "No need to be nervous. Kenneth's a great guy." Then he noticed the bottle of brandy in Kenneth's hands and asked, "Wait, that bottle. What's the occasion? Did someone order it?" I wasn't familiar with brandy, so I didn't think much of it. But Ryan widened his eyes and turned to me. "Jordan, do you have any idea what that is? That's an insanely expensive brandy." Kenneth nodded and said, "That's right. This is our most expensive KAC. A customer at that table ordered it, so I took it out of the safe." A drink kept in a safe. I had never heard of such a thing before. "Just how expensive is that?" I blurted out. "Jordan, this bottle costs 5 figures," Ryan said to me. "What? Are you serious?" I was so shocked that I couldn't help but shout. Kenneth laughed and leaned in to whisper, "I'll sneak you a little taste later, Jordan." Then he walked away. I wasn't sure if someone like me, who was perfectly content with convenience store canned cocktails, deserved to taste such an extravagant drink. A short while later, an older man entered the restaurant. He spoke to the staff at the entrance. My companion should already be dining inside. Then he stepped into the main dining area. I glanced toward the table he was heading for and saw someone I recognized sitting there. "Ah." My voice slipped out unintentionally. Ryan noticed my reaction and asked, "What's up? You know him?" I lowered my voice and said, "Yeah. He's a manager from one of our client companies. Can't say this too loudly, but he's a real piece of work, kind of a nightmare to deal with." That person was Marcus, our client. "I see. Yeah, he does have that kind of vibe," Ryan said with a small smirk. Then he pointed out, "Looks like that expensive cognac was ordered by their table." Sure enough, there was a glass of deep amber-colored brandy in front of Marcus. Considering Kirkland Corporation was a major company, I assumed they could afford such luxuries. By now, I had figured out that the older man who had just entered was Mr. Kirkland himself. He sat down with a hearty laugh and immediately picked up his glass of high-end cognac. I was watching too intently. Perhaps feeling my gaze, Marcus glanced over at me. At first, he looked away, but then, as if realizing something, he turned back and glared. Crap. I tried to avert my eyes, but then I realized if he took that as a sign of weakness, he might make things even worse for me later. I decided it was better to be direct, so I gave him a small, polite nod. Marcus abruptly stood up, holding his glass of cognac. He walked straight toward our table. Once he reached us, he stood beside our table, looking down at us with a smug expression. Then he said, Well, I never expected to see someone like you dining in a place like this." As usual, Marcus had a way of being incredibly rude. I forced a polite smile, but before I could say anything, Ryan smoothly stepped in. "I'm Jordan's brother. Tonight, we're celebrating his birthday. Thank you for always looking after him." Ryan greeted him politely. Marcus smirked. "I see. Well, it's obvious that Jordan wouldn't be able to afford this place on his own, so his older brother decided to splurge, huh? But don't you think that's a bit much, even for a birthday? You must not be making much money if you're still treating your younger brother like this. I imagine you're just as unimpressive as he is." I was used to being insulted, but when my brother was insulted, I felt anger. I lost my temper and blurted out without thinking, "Marcus, you can insult me all you want. I'm used to it. But I won't stand for you insulting my brother. Please leave." When I saw Marcus's face tense up at my words, I thought, oh no. Normally, I kept things diplomatic, carefully dodging Marcus's provocations. But hearing him mock my brother had made me lose my cool, and it was too late to take it back. Marcus's voice dropped to a chilling tone as he said, "Oh, you've grown quite bold, Jordan, speaking to me like that. You really must not know fear." For a second, I panicked. Should I apologize? Should I grovel? But no, why should I have to apologize? I hadn't done anything wrong. So instead of backing down, I met Marcus's glare head-on. Marcus sneered down at me. "Get on your knees and apologize, Jordan. It'd be quite a sight, don't you think? A man bowing down in a place like this. Our fellow diners would be in for a real treat." I had absolutely no intention of apologizing. I glared back at him even harder. Seeing this, Marcus muttered, "If you really won't apologize." Then, without warning, he flung the contents of his glass, drenching my brother's face with the expensive cognac. "Whoa!" Ryan yelped in surprise. I was shocked. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing? Are you insane?" I was caught off guard by Marcus's unexpected action and hastily asked that. "You're the crazy one for talking back to me. Now get on your knees. If you don't want to lose your job, you'll do as I say," Marcus said. Ryan, still dripping, suddenly chuckled. "Wow, now this is unexpected. I've been through quite a lot in my 37 years, but never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd get a face full of high-end cognac. I might be the only person in the world to experience something this unique. Honestly, I should be honored. I mean, how much did that splash alone cost? A few hundred? A few $1,000s? It's like being showered in cash. What a thrill." His voice was so unbelievably cheerful that I almost laughed. The only one not amused was Marcus. "What the hell? Is your brother insane? You're both out of your minds," Marcus declared. Ryan wiped his face with the back of his hand and said, "Jordan, I know you wouldn't do this, but just to be clear, you don't need to apologize to this guy." Marcus scoffed. "Your brother's pretty cocky too. Well, whatever. If you absolutely refuse to apologize, that's fine. I'll just cut off business with Jordan's company. Without our deal, Jordan's company might go under. And if that happens, he'll have to take responsibility and resign. No, he'll probably be fired immediately after the deal is canceled. Wait a second. Either way, the company itself will be gone. Well, I guess losing his job is inevitable then." He laughed as if he were enjoying himself. At this point, Kenneth had returned with a towel and quietly handed it to Ryan. Then, Mr. Kirkland of Kirkland Corporation, who had been sitting at the table with Marcus, also noticed the commotion and walked over to our table. Surrounded by various people, Marcus sneered, "Ha ha. Everyone's watching you, Jordan. You insulted an important client, and now you're fired. Ha." As he laughed, I noticed something. Both Kenneth and Mr. Kirkland were looking at him with cold, disgusted expressions. Ryan, on the other hand, looked like he was having the time of his life, grinning like he was thoroughly enjoying the situation. I took in the moment and confidently said, "You're the one who's getting fired first." Hearing my words, Marcus's eyes widened in shock. "What the hell are you talking about even? Now you dare talk back to me. Unbelievable." Mr. Kirkland said, "This is the one who should be speechless. Here is me." Marcus's face showed an expression that looked both disappointed and exhausted. Hearing that, Kenthi gave a wry smile. "What do you mean, Mr. Kirkland?" Marcus asked, sounding flustered. Mr. Kirkland didn't respond and simply hung his head in silence. "Marcus, you really didn't know." He smiled slightly before delivering the final blow. "Jordan's brother Ryan is the president of Ryan Corporation. You may not recognize the name, but surely you've heard of our dining group." Kenneth, the owner of the shop and my brother's old friend, explained that to Marcus. "Our dining group? You mean the giant restaurant corporation that owns 300 locations nationwide? You're saying that he's the president?" He was practically shouting in disbelief. Ryan reluctantly took out his business card holder from his pocket and handed over his card. "I only introduced myself as Jordan's brother earlier, so I apologize for the late introduction. I'm Ryan, president of Ryan Corporation." Marcus took the card with trembling hands as my brother handed it to him. "Ah, I see. I sincerely apologize for my behavior. Your brother has always been a great help to us, Marcus said in a trembling voice. But it was far too late. And what is that pathetic attempt at a turnaround? Do you think we've all forgotten what you just said? Nearly everyone in this restaurant heard you insult Mr. Kensington's brother, not to mention you poured liquor on the man himself. That's not something a rational human being would do. Mr. Kirkland shook his head. In this day and age, incidents like this spread fast. If this gets out, our company's reputation will be in ruins. Mr. Kirkland then added, honestly, you've had way too many problems with clients for a long time. I've had enough. Marcus collapsed onto the floor in shock, completely dazed. But when he suddenly snapped back to reality, he fell to his knees and bowed deeply. Mr. Kensington, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Ryan responded cheerfully, I don't mind at all. In fact, I found it amusing, so I should be grateful. Having cognac thrown in my face, that's way too lucky. Our company is going to be even more prosperous now. But immediately after, he turned serious. I don't care about what happened to me, but I won't forgive you for insulting my brother. Apologize to him by bowing down on the floor. Marcus, looking completely broken as if he would do whatever he was told, immediately dropped at his knees and said, I'm truly sorry, Jordan. At this point, having him bowing down didn't make me feel any better. It was probably just because my brother told him to do it, so it didn't feel sincere at all. Since I had nothing to say, I just stood there silently. Then Mr. Kirkland yelled, Enough, Marcus. This is disgraceful. Let's go. Resign and reflect on your actions. Everyone, he's fired. I sincerely apologize for the trouble he caused tonight. After handing his credit card to Kenneth for the payment, he dragged Marcus out of the restaurant. Once Kenneth finished processing the payment with Mr. Kirkland's card and returned it to him, he headed back into the kitchen. Thanks, Ryan. Do you want to wash your face? When I asked him that, Ryan grinned and said, I'm good. Until I get home and take a shower, I think I'll just enjoy the scent of cognac on my face. His ridiculous comment made us both laugh. Then, at some point, Kenneth appeared out of nowhere and placed 2 glasses filled with amber-colored liquor on our table, saying, Here you go. This is? I wasn't sure, but Ryan immediately confirmed. It's the most expensive cognac in the house. The same one Mr. Kirkland and his group were drinking earlier. It's a birthday present for you, Jordan, Kenneth said. Kenneth, this cognac is way too expensive. If you're treating us, your bar might go bankrupt, Ryan said, half joking, half serious. Kenneth then explained. Actually, Mr. Kirkland's table had ordered 3 more glasses of cognac, and the amount was already included in the bill. But with all that chaos earlier, we missed the timing to serve them. Then, before they left, Mr. Kirkland told me at the register, I'll pay for those as well, so please serve them to Mr. Kensington and his brother. Hearing this, Ryan laughed and said, As expected, Mr. Kirkland is a successful businessman running a big company, and he's got a big heart to match. Well then, let's accept this with gratitude, Jordan. He lightly clinked his glass against mine and said, Cheers. I let out a small wry smile and said, Cheers, before cautiously taking a sip of the luxurious cognac. Fruity aroma. It's different from wine. That was my first impression. It tasted like something for grown-ups. Though I was already 27 and technically an adult, I felt like I wasn't quite qualified to appreciate this kind of drink yet. I'm still as pretentious as ever. Does that mean Ryan isn't inexperienced? Well, considering he's a true celebrity, I guess it's only natural. Still, no matter the situation, wasting such a fine drink by throwing it on someone's face like Marcus did was unthinkable. Both Ryan and I took our time, savoring the exquisite cognac. The next day, when I called Kirkland Incorporated Corporation regarding our business deal, an employee informed me that Marcus had resigned and that a different employee, Sean, would now be in charge. From then on, I worked with Sean, who was a very pleasant person, making business interactions much smoother. I was relieved that I no longer had to walk on eggshells around Marcus. Mr. Kirkland personally apologized to me again, and he even went to see Ryan to apologize in person. Since Ryan was a forgiving person, there were no lingering tensions between our companies. In fact, he swiftly consulted the police and legal experts to ensure that no videos of Ryan getting drenched in cognac would be spread on social media. He had it legally prohibited from being posted online. For some reason, whenever Ryan gets involved with troublesome people, they often end up reforming and becoming better individuals. Well, this probably because Ryan is generous, but also someone who firmly points out what's wrong. He punishes yet forgives. This balance is probably what makes him so remarkable. Maybe even our father, Mark, might mellow out with age and become a better person when faced with Ryan. If that day comes, I hope he will finally apologize to Ryan's mother, Rachel, and to my late mother, Marie, and learn to treat people with kindness. With my brother by my side, I believe that's possible. And I want to believe that I have inherited some of his good traits as well. So, I will live my life with sincerity. That's what I decided. I still don't understand. Dealing with a middle school graduate who lacks common sense is really annoying. The corporation is embarrassed by low levels of education. In front of 70 other newcomers, these icy remarks were thrown at me. Everyone was immediately silenced by the statement's harshness. Anger and guilt seared through my entire body. I didn't feel obligated to continue working at this position after being so severely insulted. I get it. I will be rescinding my acceptance of the offer because it appears that this company does not have room for me. I grinned and got up from my chair. Rachel from the department was the one who would actually face consequences as a result of my choice. Jacob Taylor is my name. I'm 36 years old and have made the decision that it's time for a change of career. My father, George Taylor, recommended that I change employment and put me in touch with an advertising firm. But just because I did as he suggested doesn't mean that I get along well with my family. My connection with my father has been tense for years, if anything. My father, who made a good living at an advertising agency, was often giving me and the rest of the family strict instructions since he was so sure of his judgment. In hindsight, he was frequently correct, but I couldn't stand as a young man to have my destiny predetermined for me. When it came to choosing my course in life, my father's domineering behavior was evident. My father has worked tirelessly to steer me in the right direction since I was a little child, enrolling me in elite prep schools and encouraging me to sit for entrance examinations to private schools. Although I have a younger sister and an older sister, my father had very high expectations for me because I was the long-awaited son. But it was music, films, and other art forms that captivated me, not the life of a high-achieving elite. I was enthralled with these pieces as a child and quickly wanted to make my own. By middle school, I was using my computer to create videos that I would show my friends. My first producing experience began when I was requested to do a promotional video for the band one day. I put all of my middle school knowledge and abilities into the project, which I then uploaded to the school's website. Soon after, I got an offer from someone outside of the school who liked my sense of style. I experienced the excitement of being acknowledged solely for my own work for the first time. Others have given me sincere praise for my self-taught video production abilities. I launched my own video production business the day after my 15th birthday and started working on a variety of projects. My primary motive was to get away from my father as quickly as possible, even if I was happy to have my talent recognized. My father's meddling had gotten worse by the time I was in high school, and I was desperate to get away from home. The business was doing far better than I had anticipated at the time, and my work had brought in recurring business. I was making enough money to sustain myself. The fact that it was all created by a 17-year-old may have contributed to its allure. My goal was to pursue a career in video production. I took the risky choice to leave high school and relocate to France in order to refine my skills in order to pursue that desire. I received a severe reprimand from my father, George, when I declared my intention to drop out of high school. After relocating to France, I basically left my family and put myself into studying and making videos. A few years later, I returned to the States but still kept my distance from my family. After coming back, I continued to work independently, taking on various projects as a video creator. Now, 15 years later, I oversee video production projects, give instructions to team members, and manage the creative process as a seasoned video creator. Through work, I met my wife, and now we're expecting a child. She's 5 months pregnant. As I stroked my wife's growing belly, feeling grateful for the joy in my life, unexpected news reached me. My mother called to tell me that my father had collapsed. Hearing this, I rushed back to my hometown. For the first time in decades, I saw my father, George, lying weak and frail in a hospital bed with much less strength than I remembered. He held my hand and, with teary eyes, pleaded with me. Please come visit the family. Find a stable job to put us at ease. I can introduce you to the company I used to work for. Hearing his faint, desperate plea, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. Seeing my once overbearing father crying and begging, I decided to fulfill this first and final act of filial piety. But soon, I realized just how cunning my father could be. After I agreed to take the job, he recovered rapidly. Within 2 weeks, he was cleared for home care. The day after returning home, he was already enjoying his favorite beef bowl with great enthusiasm. Well, Dad's recovery is good news, but if he's fine now, I don't need to take the job. When I tried to back out, my father stopped me, saying he had already made all the arrangements for my employment. Even though I'm feeling better now, you have a wife and a child on the way. It's better to have a stable income. If you don't like it, you can quit anytime. Just give working for a company a try. He said this with a calm expression, tossing a few pieces of his favorite sweets into his mouth after dinner. I was already 35. When I was single, I could go anywhere and do anything on my own. But now, being married with a child on the way, I had started thinking about life in terms of decades. A stable income would bring peace of mind to my wife and child. Once I considered this, it didn't seem right to dismiss my father's proposal out of sheer defiance as I might have in my younger years. In the end, I decided to join the company my father had recommended. It felt like I was simply following the course my father, George, had meticulously set up for me, which left me feeling unsettled. But as a man, I resolved to keep the promise I had made. From that day on, I began adjusting my video projects accordingly. I completed my final assignment just before the orientation day at Southfield Agency, a major advertising company my father had introduced me to. On the day of the orientation, I left home early and headed to the event hall where it was being held. The unfamiliar suit felt tight around my neck and waist, and the thought of wearing this every day weighed heavily on me. Even so, I steeled myself and pressed forward, thinking of my promise to my father and the future of my wife and unborn child. When I arrived, many new employees had already gathered and were checking in one by one. While I had been hired through an experienced worker program, most of the others were fresh graduates. Seeing these bright, energetic young people fresh out of college, I felt a pang of nostalgia. Was I ever that vibrant? I wondered as I completed the check-in process and walked down the hallway to the venue. Suddenly, someone called out loudly from behind me. "Hey, you there! Stop slacking off and help out." The person who abruptly scolded me was a woman in a white business suit. She looked to be in her 40s, and her heels clacked loudly as she walked toward me, scrutinizing me with a condescending gaze. "Oh, I don't recognize your face. What department are you in? What's your name?" "I am Jacob Taylor. As for my department, I don't know yet." At my response, she dramatically frowned and raised her voice. "You're saying you don't even know your own department? Don't think you can use a lame excuse like that to avoid doing chores. Well, I really don't know. I am a new hire, so I'm supposed to learn about that starting today. Apparently, she mistook me for someone who was already working at the company. I thought that would be the end of the conversation, but instead, she burst into loud laughter. What? You're saying you're a new employee? At your age? Oh, that's hilarious. You definitely don't look like you're in your 20s. I'm 35. I was hired through the experienced worker program. Being ridiculed by a stranger right off the bat didn't sit well with me. I intended to cut the conversation short and leave, but the woman persisted. Experienced worker program. Someone like you, who doesn't look capable of doing much, actually passed the recruitment process. What kind of tricks did you pull? While it was true that my father had introduced me to the company, I had formally gone through the application process to be here. I gave a vague response, and she crossed her arms, leaning back as if to look down on me even more. Let me give you some advice. If you work hard for me, I will help you climb the ranks. I'm Rachel Harper, the sales director of this company. I have connections with the higher-ups, so make sure you stay on my good side. After declaring this, Rachel walked away, her heels clicking loudly. I was baffled by how rude some employees could be, but I pulled myself together and entered the venue. The spacious hall had rows of tables separated into sections for new graduates and experienced hires like me. The new graduates all wore similar black suits and had nervous expressions, while the people seated near me in the experienced hire section ranged from those who looked as young as high schoolers to those older than me. I found myself curious about the kinds of work experiences they might have had and looked forward to talking to them later. For now, I sat at my seat, reviewed the materials that had been distributed, and waited for the orientation to begin. The seats gradually filled up, and the orientation started on schedule. According to the materials, the first item on the agenda was a speech from the company president. When the president, Joe Lewis, appeared on stage, everyone turned their attention to him with serious expressions. I straightened up in my seat and listened carefully. From Joe's speech, I could sense his sincerity. He passionately spoke about wanting to invigorate the advertising industry as a whole with the company's efforts. The enthusiasm in his words seemed to inspire the new hires, their eyes beginning to sparkle. Hearing such a committed leader, I felt a bit more optimistic about working at this company. That optimistic feeling didn't last long. After Joe's speech ended, an announcement was made that there would be a short break before the next segment. The atmosphere relaxed, and quiet chatter began to fill the hall. Looking at the other new hires seated at my table, a young man sitting to my right struck up a conversation. You're also here through the experienced worker program, right? I'm Kyle Nichols, a web designer. Nice to meet you. I'm Jacob Taylor, a video creator. Nice to meet you too. Kyle seemed straightforward and had a friendly demeanor, leaving a positive impression. While we exchanged a bit of small talk in low voices, an all too familiar high-pitched voice rang out again. Oh my, this table has quite the variety in appearance and age. Is this where they've gathered everyone who isn't part of the new graduate hires? Standing there was none other than Rachel, the woman who had made snide remarks to me earlier. With a broad smile, she approached and began scanning the members hired through the experienced worker program one by one. Recalling her rude behavior in the hallway, I braced myself. Rachel pulled out some documents and raised her voice further. Even if you're an experienced hire, do you think people who couldn't even try for a new graduate position can handle working at our company? You probably can't do much, so I will have you start as a gopher. What kind of thing was this to say to employees who would soon be her colleagues? The other new hires at my table exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to react. As Rachel hummed a tune and flipped through her documents, the other hires, like me, were left dumbfounded. No promising candidates this year either. Oh, Nichols. She glanced at the documents in her hand, then at Kyle, who was seated beside me, and nodded to herself as if confirming something. Oh, you must be the one everyone's been talking about. Exceptional employees like you are more than welcome. Let's do our best together. Ah, thank you, Kyle replied politely, though he seemed puzzled by the sudden praise. His resume must have been quite impressive. I began to reconsider my opinion of Rachel, thinking she might at least recognize talent. But my thoughts were cut short when her next words left me stunned. Rachel turned to me, chuckled condescendingly, and declared loudly, "And then there's the complete opposite, this guy here. You didn't even finish high school, did you? It's brazen of you to think you can work at a major company like ours without a diploma." The room fell silent in an instant. Realizing this guy referred to me, a wave of anger and humiliation burned through my entire body. Mocked in front of 70 other new hires, I slowly raised my head, my anger simmering. When Rachel met my gaze, she shrugged mockingly and waved her hand as if shooing away a stray dog. "Still don't get it. High school dropouts are so dense, and it's frustrating. There's no way someone like you could handle proper work. Low education is a disgrace to the company." Understood. It seems this company has no place for me, so I will withdraw my acceptance. There was no reason to tolerate such humiliation just to work here. After all, I had only agreed to this job to fulfill my father's wishes. Now that he was healthy again, there was no need to endure this indignity. With a smile, I announced my decision to withdraw and stood up from my seat. As I made my way to leave, the hall buzzed with murmurs of surprise. Yet Rachel just smirked maliciously, clearly enjoying herself. "A high school dropout like you wouldn't even understand basic instructions if you were my subordinate. At least you're smart enough to realize your incompetence and leave before becoming a burden. Good for you." She laughed loudly to herself, her voice echoing in the room. There was no point in arguing with someone like her. Resolving to say nothing more, I turned my back on her. It was only when I was about to leave that Rachel seemed to realize I was serious. Grabbing a microphone, she addressed me in a loud voice. "All new hires, return to your seats immediately. Your selfish actions are disrupting the orientation." Rachel didn't bother retracting her rude remarks. Instead, she singled me out for criticism by using the microphone so the entire room could hear. She was clearly trying to paint me as the unreasonable one for leaving the orientation midway. This way, Rachel could maintain her image as a respectable superior reprimanding a disrespectful new hire. "Earlier, you said people like me are a disgrace to the company. I'm simply acting in line with your words by withdrawing. Why are you stopping me?" "It seems there's been a misunderstanding," Rachel replied. She maintained her confident stance and, if anything, puffed out her chest proudly as she lectured me. "In the working world, you'll often hear things you don't like. Walking away every time that happens isn't exactly professional behavior." I looked at her in disbelief, but Rachel continued her criticisms through the microphone without the slightest sign of remorse. "That said, if you truly want to decline the offer, I respect your decision. After all, we can't force someone to work if they don't want to." Rachel made it clear that, in her view, I was the only one being unreasonable. She had likely used tactics like this before to avoid being seen as the villain. I considered loudly recounting our earlier exchange right then and there, but this was the orientation for new hires. If I caused any more of a scene, it would only inconvenience the other new employees. Besides, I had nothing to lose by declining the offer, while Rachel would be the one facing difficulties. With that in mind, I confirmed my withdrawal and left. The new hires at my table, including Kyle, looked between Rachel and me with concern, but no one dared to speak up. Feeling many eyes on my back, I loosened my uncomfortable tie as I walked out of the hall. When I got home, I briefly explained the situation to my wife and told her I had decided against working for the company. I left out the specific insults and only mentioned that I had been unfairly judged based on my education. My wife quietly nodded. Having known me for years, she understood my personality and the effort I had put into my career. She didn't seem to think I had thrown away the opportunity in a moment of anger. Without needing much explanation, she told me she trusted my judgment completely and gave me a kind smile. "I'm sorry for worrying you while you're pregnant, but I'll do everything I can to provide for you and our child." With renewed determination, I decided to dedicate myself even more to my work as a video creator. And so, I resumed the career I had been building for years. In the end, my time as a corporate employee was over before it even began. But I realized that being able to choose my own way of working suited me best. Feeling as refreshed as I had when I first started out, I dove into my projects. I was just about to reach out to old clients to look for work when something unexpected happened. I received news that I had won the grand prize in an international video competition I had applied for. The competition focused on videos created in the past 3 years that used AI to deliver smiles and inspiration. Since I had planned to work at a company, I had submitted a video I considered the culmination of my efforts. The news came long after I had forgotten about the application, and I jumped for joy. Seeing me act like an excited child, my wife was surprised but couldn't contain her own happiness when she learned about my win. We celebrated that night at our favorite restaurant. As the first American recipient of the award, news of my achievement spread rapidly online that evening and was broadcast nationwide on TV the next day. Congratulations poured in from France, and job offers started flooding in. Amid the chaos of responding to the attention, I noticed several voicemails on my personal phone. They were from Southfield Agency, the company where I had declined the offer just a day earlier. The first few messages sounded like Rachel, but she was so flustered that I couldn't understand her. I finally understood the situation when I listened to the voicemail from Sean, the president. He requested that I come to the office the next morning. I had already declined the offer, so I wondered if there was some issue. Curious, I decided to visit the company again the next day. The following morning, I arrived at the designated conference room to find several people already gathered. Among them were Sean, who had given a speech at the orientation yesterday, Rachel, glaring at me with a scowl, and, for some reason, Kyle, who had been seated next to me during the orientation. It seemed they had all been waiting for me to arrive. The moment I walked in, Rachel raised her voice. "Jacob, why did you leave yesterday without permission? Because of you, I got reprimanded." "Quiet down. Let him explain the situation first," Sean snapped, silencing Rachel, who pouted but stayed quiet. Sean gestured for me to sit and began speaking with a calm expression. "Jacob, I saw the news. Congratulations on your award. When the company learned that one of our new hires had won, it caused a big commotion this morning. According to Sean, the company had formed several internal teams to participate in the contest. As an advertising firm, winning an international award would elevate the company's reputation, so they had dedicated a year to creating their submissions. However, none of their entries made it past the initial rounds. When the news broke that I, a new hire, had won the grand prize, everyone celebrated, thinking an exceptionally talented asset had joined the team. That excitement, however, turned to confusion when it became apparent that I had declined the offer. Our experienced hire program assumes that the offer leads to formal employment. So why did you decline before officially starting? It seemed no one had informed Sean about what had transpired at the orientation. While annoyed at the lack of communication, I explained everything that had happened during the event. Naturally, Rachel didn't sit quietly. "That's a misunderstanding. In my interpretation, it wasn't like that." But each time, Sean sternly cut her off, allowing me to continue my explanation. I was insulted about my education and age, leading me to conclude that I couldn't work at this company. I decided to withdraw from the offer to avoid disrupting the other new hires or causing further issues, as Rachel had suggested. "I see. So that's what happened," Sean replied, letting out a deep sigh and burying his head in his hands. Seeing this, Rachel's eyes flared as she turned on me again. "You're causing trouble for Sean. If you feel bad about it, you should take back your resignation. Still as rude as ever, Rachel aggressively pushed me. Even if you didn't finish school, you won an award, so you can work here. Why are you just standing there? Sign the acceptance letter already. Enough. Do you know who you're talking to? Sean's booming voice cut through the room before I could respond. What? Rachel, show some respect. Do you realize you've been incredibly rude to Jacob Taylor, the son of our former CEO and current chairman, George Taylor? Rachel froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Her face turned pale as she stumbled back, her knees shaking until she collapsed into a chair. Do you what? The chairman's son. But I thought the new hire this year was your son, Scene. My son? What are you talking about? I only have daughters, and none of them have joined the company, Scene replied, visibly irritated. Rachel, trembling, pointed at Kyle with a shaky finger. Then what about Kyle? I thought he was your son, so I've been treating him kindly since yesterday. He has the same last name as me, but he's a stranger. Did you bring him here without verifying anything? Kyle flinched as all eyes turned to him, looking startled. Even at a glance, it was clear Kyle bore no resemblance to Scene. It seemed Rachel had misunderstood and dragged Kyle into the meeting without any basis. Though I felt sorry for Kyle, Rachel wasn't done making excuses. I admit I was mistaken, but this means Jacob joined through nepotism, doesn't it? Jacob was not hired through connections. We evaluated his abilities and decided to bring him into the company. He's talented enough to win an international award. How can you still deny his value? Sheen's anger flared as he pulled out a thick file. It was my resume, the one I had submitted during the job application process. In high school, I had started experimenting with video production and founded a company. After moving to France, I created web and video projects that earned recognition, eventually leading to opportunities to produce visuals for live performances by artists. When I returned to the US, I leveraged that experience to gain attention as a filmmaker, known for dynamic camera work, a vibrant visual style, and rich storytelling. And Jacob's work makes me a personal fan. I believed he could positively influence not only our younger employees but the entire company. That's why I asked George to encourage him to join us. I see. I just assumed that he was a high school dropout, Rachel stammered, her body trembling under Scene's piercing glare. Despite her attempts to shift the blame with tears and excuses, Scene's anger didn't waver. Rachel glanced around desperately, but realizing neither I nor Kyle would come to her aid, she slumped her shoulders in defeat. Rachel, don't you have something to say to Jacob? I understand. Reluctantly, Rachel apologized to me, though it was obvious she was only doing so because Scene had forced her to. I accepted it as a formality. Apparently, Scene shared my sentiment, as he let out a relieved sigh just as a secretary approached to speak with him. Excuse me for a moment. Jacob, could you stay here a little longer? I don't mind. Knowing that Scene would likely inform my father about everything, I chose to stay put rather than risk complicating things further. I'd assumed nothing else would happen, but I was proven wrong. As soon as Scene's footsteps faded, Rachel abruptly raised her head, glaring at me sharply. I apologized, so we're even now. You'll come to work tomorrow, right? Otherwise, I'll be scolded for letting a golden opportunity slip through my fingers. No. I already declined the offer, so I won't be returning. I replied firmly, surprised by how quickly her attitude had shifted. Grinding her teeth in frustration, Rachel refused to back down. Think about my position. I've been getting blamed all morning for driving you away. You should be the one begging to stay since I was willing to hire someone with your lack of education. It became clear that her apology had been insincere and that she still looked down on me. Her behavior, full of contempt, finally pushed me to my limit. You've been belittling me as a dropout since yesterday, but for your information, I studied film at Sorbonne University while living in France. Sorbonne. So what? I graduated from a prestigious private university in New York, Rachel retorted, folding her arms as if proud of her credentials. However, her smug expression quickly disappeared when Kyle, who had been quietly listening, suddenly became animated, his cheeks flushing red with excitement. What? Sorbonne University is a world-renowned institution that produces top talent in the film industry. It's consistently ranked in the top 20 globally, way harder to get into than most universities. Huh. World rankings. Rachel still seemed clueless, causing Kyle to shake his head in exasperation. It's an incredible achievement. For context, universities like Harvard are in the top 30, and others like MIT fall lower. The gap between American universities and Sorbonne is massive. Jacob isn't just a top-tier filmmaker, but also highly educated. Kyle continued to gush about how impressive it was, excitedly asking me questions about my time at Sorbonne. Rachel, who had been observing the situation, initially stood with her mouth agape, but her face gradually turned bright red with a mix of anger and embarrassment. So what? Sorbonne, whatever. I'm a department head at this company. That makes me far superior to you rookie employees. That's why I already told you. I'm not joining this company, I replied with a sigh, reiterating my decision to decline the offer. Just then, a low, intimidating voice spoke from behind Rachel. Rachel, it seems you still lack self-awareness. Seen? Since when have you been here? Seen, having returned from his earlier task, stood glaring at Rachel with a fearsome expression that resembled a guardian statue. Our company prides itself on welcoming talented individuals from all backgrounds. Judging someone based on their education is unacceptable. Caught red-handed making snide remarks, Rachel couldn't muster a defense. She opened and closed her mouth several times, flustered, while Steen pressed her further. I also received another report about you, Rachel. Kyle, would you mind explaining? Sir Kyle, who had been called upon, nervously stood up. Then, right in front of Rachel and me, both visibly shocked, he began to make an astonishing accusation. After yesterday's orientation, Rachel asked me to exchange personal contact information with her. I declined at first, but she kept insisting, trying to get my phone number and address. Be quiet. That has nothing to do with this. Rachel's face turned crimson as she desperately tried to silence Kyle. She moved as if to approach, but froze when Sean gave her a sharp glare. Please continue, Kyle. Are you saying Rachel was making advances toward you? Yes. I was confused as to why she was so persistent with a newly hired employee like me, but today it all makes sense. Rachel thought I was your son, Sean. As Kyle pointed this out, Rachel collapsed to the floor, burying her face in her hands. That's not true. It's a misunderstanding. I'd only wanted him to feel comfortable coming to me with any issues. Rachel, how could you? Sean's voice thundered, cutting off Rachel's weak excuses. Ignoring her groaning, Kyle continued with his account. After the orientation, Rachel had invited him to a one-on-one dinner. Despite his repeated refusals, she kept pressing until he reluctantly agreed. During the dinner, Rachel excessively praised him and repeatedly assured him that she would support him. Kyle, his face tight with discomfort, handed his phone to us. Here's the evidence. I've received numerous personal messages from Rachel since early this morning. I didn't know what to do, so I reported it to the company. Stop. Don't show them that. Rachel screamed, her face streaked with sweat and tears. But it was too late. The screen Kyle showed us was filled with messages from Rachel, their content clearly inappropriate. Most of the messages were filled with sweet, romantic language, as if they were intended for a lover. The abundance of heart emojis and symbols made it immediately clear that the content was highly inappropriate for a manager to send to a subordinate. Were you trying to pressure Kyle into a relationship because you thought he was Sean's son? So what if I was? Love is free. I don't want to be judged by age or title. Having her message exchanges exposed to Sean, it seemed Rachel had nothing left to hide. She abandoned all pretense and brazenly shot back at me. Honestly, Rachel, you're the last person who should be talking about not judging people by age or education, given how you've treated me. And for the record, it's entirely inappropriate for a superior to pressure a subordinate into a relationship. I don't care anymore. If Kyle isn't the president's son, I am not interested in him. Finally, Rachel collapsed to the floor, planting both hands on the ground and wailing openly without regard for her surroundings. After her outburst subsided, Rachel slumped in silence, only to be escorted out of the room by security guards summoned by Sean. I'm sorry you had to witness such a disgraceful scene, Jacob and Kyle. I deeply regret the unpleasant experience you endured, Sean said, letting out a heavy sigh. I will personally ensure Rachel is held accountable for her actions. Kyle, I hope you'll continue working with us without worry. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I look forward to contributing to the company. Encouraged directly by Sean, Kyle expressed his gratitude, his sincerity evident. Sean smiled slightly at Kyle's enthusiasm before turning to me. Jacob, I would still like you to join the company as initially planned, if you're willing. I'm sorry, but I've decided to focus on my own work. I had already declined the offer, and thanks to the news of my award, I was receiving numerous job requests. Although I felt bad for Sean, I had no intention of returning to the company. Recognizing my firm decision, Sean gave a wry smile. I see. I apologize for asking repeatedly. In that case, would you be open to serving as a special advisor for the company? Your insights would be invaluable. If I can be of help, I'd be glad to assist. I've always been interested in the company my father worked so hard to build, I replied with a smile. Sean's face lit up as he extended his hand, and we exchanged a firm handshake. Rachel later became the subject of an internal investigation. It revealed that she had repeatedly exploited her position to harass subordinates, assigning grueling tasks to some while favoring others. Worse, it was discovered that over several years, she had embezzled company funds to pay for dates with her favored employees. Facing mounting evidence, Rachel finally issued an apology, but Sean took decisive action. She was terminated for cause and faced a lawsuit for damages. Burdened with debt to pay off the damages, Rachel searched for a new job, but her condescending attitude remained unchanged. As a result, no one was willing to hire her, and she now scrapes by with day-to-day gig work just to cover her living expenses. Despite once boasting so much about her education and titles, Rachel now works under younger supervisors who frequently reprimand her. As for me, my personal life flourished after that. My child was born safely, and the indescribable joy of holding my baby for the first time rivaled the excitement of winning my award. When I exclaimed how happy I was, my wife burst into laughter. My father, too, was overjoyed by the birth. Whenever we visited my family, he would dote on his grandchild, his face glowing with pride. Having fully recovered from his illness, he was healthier than ever, and I realized I needed to work even harder to match his vitality. Meanwhile, I continued my role as an advisor for Southfield Agency. During my visits, I often ran into Kyle, who never failed to praise my work. I saw your latest project, Jacob. The vibrant colors are incredible. Please teach me how you achieve that. Hearing him say things like that and seeing his enthusiasm, I plan to pass on the skills and knowledge I'd accumulated. My company has continued to release work successfully since then. Recently, I've been receiving many requests from both domestic and international artists, and my video creations can now be seen in TV commercials and on the internet. Inspired by my experiences, I've taken steps toward new challenges. Having my life and efforts dismissed by Rachel once forced me to reevaluate how I view the world, and it's given me a fresh perspective on how I want to contribute to society. Until now, I've been creating video content for clients, but this time, I wanted to work on something that was entirely my own. Driven by this desire, I released my debut short film as a director, which went on to win numerous international film awards. Reflecting on this, I've come to realize that no matter what happens in life, how we perceive and process those experiences can become a source of growth. Looking ahead, I see even more opportunities opening up before me. I want to continue creating video works that brighten people's spirits. Everyone's here, so let's go. Driver, just go ahead without worrying about it. The bus left after our manager, Bob, said those icy remarks. I could see Catherine's nervous face staring down at me from the window. First of all, I was the only one assigned a totally different location for the meeting. Hold on. Please let me in as well. As the vehicle withdrew, my voice reverberated in vain. I watched TV in silence at home. At that moment, a message from Bob buzzed through my phone. Sincerely, I assumed this would occur eventually. Bob's frantic voice could be heard when I picked up the phone. We just arrived at the hotel, and they informed us that the $50,000 lodging cost would apply without you. What's happening? The cost of abandoning me was high. I didn't care if they camped out or coughed up $50,000. I was just concerned about Catherine. Sean Lucas is my name. I work for a mid-sized electronics leasing company and am 33 years old. After graduating from college, I started working in the sales department of this organization, and I'm currently in my 11th year. My days are full of motivation because I've taken on significant duties and been given significant assignments. I believe that I get along well with my coworkers, and recently, several of my less experienced colleagues have begun to admire me and want to spend time with me. Kevin is one of them in particular. We're all going out for drinks later, scene. Do you want to come? Everybody is eager to hear more of your amazing college tales. Don't tell me you're just buttering me up to make me pay. You got me. It's amusing and educational to observe the antics of younger coworkers, even though I'm still seen as young in the firm. They've taught me a lot, and they frequently help me see my own weaknesses. And it's not just the men. It's not because I'm some sort of attractive boy that the women in the office appear to like me too. 3 amiable sisters lived close to my parents' house when I was growing up, and we spent a lot of time playing together. I gained a lot of knowledge about the thoughts and joys of women. It's so soothing to be around you, Scene. You always consider from a woman's point of view. Therefore, I don't have to tread carefully. Oh, aren't you thinking about getting married soon? You are admired by many of the women in the office. I would also be raising my hand if I were single. Scene, you're what I call a gentleman at heart. Being a gentleman at heart seems to be the male equivalent of having a lovely soul. I've had many chances to date women, but none of those relationships have lasted very long. Perhaps I simply hadn't found someone I genuinely wanted to marry yet, or perhaps my expectations were too high. In addition, it's not uncommon for people in their 30s to be unmarried these days, and late weddings are more prevalent. I therefore didn't feel hurried and believed that it would be okay to be single in the event that I didn't find the appropriate person. Then, however, my perspective on life abruptly shifted. One of our new hires was a woman who was just like me. She was assigned to the same sales department as me, and her name was Catherine. It felt like lightning struck me when I first saw her because she was so incredibly beautiful. Catherine is my name. I'll put in a lot of effort to contribute significantly to the team. I'm excited to collaborate with each and every one of you. Her words were polite, and she had a calm demeanor for someone her age. There was nothing flashy about her at all. I found myself thinking that maybe I had remained single all this time just so I could marry her. I was assigned as Catherine's mentor. This gave me a legitimate reason to talk to her, and a perfect chance to show her my good side. However, a significant obstacle arose. That obstacle was someone close to us. The immediate obstacle was, without a doubt, my direct supervisor. At the same time, Catherine joined the company. Bob was transferred to our sales department as the new manager. His arrival immediately soared the atmosphere in the office. Bob was an elite who graduated from a prestigious state university. He had been with the headquarters sales department until this transfer to our branch. What this transfer meant was unclear to us. At 48 years old and never married, Bob became a topic of interest among the female employees. If he's never been married, doesn't that mean there's something wrong with his personality? Normally, a guy that high up would have arranged marriages proposed by his superiors, right? Maybe he was so disliked by women that none of those worked out. I tried to avoid getting involved in such gossip, but as we worked together, we began to realize those speculations might not be far off. Bob behaved as if bossing others around was his main job with an air of arrogance. There was one instance where an employee made a scheduling mistake during a meeting. Bob's rage was over the top, hurling insults so harsh they felt like personal attacks. Shouldn't he be focusing on more important things? As a manager, Bob should have taken the initiative to visit the client and apologize on behalf of his team. Instead, he went around badmouthing his team as incompetent, making it sound like he was the victim of unfortunate circumstances. That employee was pushed to the brink of resignation, but, thanks to our encouragement, managed to bounce back and close a big deal. On top of that, Bob seemed to develop a particular hostility toward me. The reason? Catherine. It appeared that Bob had taken a liking to Catherine and wanted to date her. However, Catherine came up with various excuses to avoid any personal interaction. But Bob soon realized that Catherine's feelings were directed toward me. Knowing that I was ahead in the race for love, Bob began harassing me in every way he could. He would intentionally give me incorrect schedules or dump an unreasonable amount of paperwork on me. Each time, other colleagues stepped in to help, and so far, I'd managed to get by without major issues. In the midst of this, Catherine seemed to be calmly observing both my and Bob's behavior. Bob is just awful, isn't he? You're doing your job perfectly fine, scene. As long as I have your support, Catherine, I can handle anything. Plus, other coworkers are on my side too. I'm really lucky to be surrounded by such great people. Ironically, Bob's oppressive behavior ended up bringing Catherine and me closer together. Amid all this, a company's sales department trip was planned. I was tasked with finding accommodations and booked a luxurious resort lodge for 10 people. As I was looking at the resort's website, Catherine peeked at my screen. Wow, you managed to book this lodge? I've heard it's incredibly popular, with a 3-year waiting list for reservations. I used some special connections to pull some strings. Just keep that part between us, though. Seeing how excited Catherine was made me look forward to the trip even more. For the trip, we planned to travel by coach bus. On the day of departure, I eagerly packed my small suitcase and headed to the designated meeting spot. However, I couldn't find any of my coworkers, and there was no bus in sight. Could it be that Bob gave me a different meeting location on purpose? I called Kevin on my phone, and he told me that everyone except me was already gathered at a completely different bus stop. Grabbing my suitcase, I started running. Sweating heavily, I somehow managed to reach the bus stop, only to find everyone already on the bus. From the window, Bob saw me and laughed smugly. Everyone's here, so let's go, driver. Don't worry about it, just go. Heartlessly, the bus pulled away. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Catherine's anxious face as she looked down at me. Wait, please let me on too. My voice echoed in vain as the bus disappeared from view. As I stood there watching the bus drive away, I felt all the energy drain from my body. Since the trip was planned for 3 days and 2 nights, I decided to treat it as an unexpected long weekend. Although I considered myself a calm and mild-mannered person, my anger boiled over at this incident. Taking out my phone, I made a quick call and then sighed deeply. Determined to make the most of my time off, I headed to a movie theater and turned off my phone. After the movie, I treated myself to a fancy solo dinner before heading back to my apartment. When I got home, I noticed the answering machine on my landline was blinking. That's when I realized my phone had been off the whole time. Turning it back on, I found a flood of voicemail messages waiting for me. In truth, I had turned off my phone knowing Bob would call once they reached the lodge. The movie theater was just an excuse. Of course, I hadn't planned on leaving it off this long. Most of the voicemails were from Bob. Just then, my phone rang again, and this time, it was Bob calling. When I answered, his voice was panicked and frantic. "We've just arrived at the lodge, but they said without you, the total cost is $50,000. What the heck is going on?" Leaving me behind came at a steep price. Whether they paid $50,000 or camped out somewhere, I couldn't care less. The only thing that worried me was Catherine. I abruptly ended my call with Bob and contacted Catherine. "I just got a call from our manager. Do you ladies have a place to stay tonight?" After a lot of searching, we managed to find a pod hotel. "We'll stay here tonight, so don't worry." I felt bad that Catherine ended up staying at a pod hotel because I wasn't there, but Catherine laughed brightly. I was expecting to stay at a luxury resort, but now I'm at a pod hotel. It's kind of funny, really. But it's a good experience. It's actually pretty fun. So what about the guys? Are they also staying at a pod hotel? Well, the three of us ladies barely managed to get in. The guys, though, they don't have anywhere to stay. They look really worn out, so I'm a bit worried. It's peak tourist season, so I guess all the lodgings are fully booked. Still, if it's just the guys waiting on the street until morning, it shouldn't be too dangerous. Besides, it's their punishment for leaving me behind. What goes around comes around. Once I confirmed that Catherine had a place to stay, I hung up. Then I called Bob, who was already in a state of panic. Letting you handle the lodging arrangements was a huge mistake. At this rate, we'll have to sleep outside in our exhausted state. Do something about this. You must be really tired. That's rough. But it's peak tourist season, so most places are probably fully booked. Exactly. I've contacted so many places, but they're all full. I get that it's impossible to find last-minute accommodations, but why can't we stay here just because you're not with us? I don't get it. I couldn't help but smirk. Why were they turned away? It was because the luxury lodge for this trip happened to be my family's business. My older brother now managed the lodge, having taken it over from our parents. This wasn't just any ordinary lodge. It was famous for its exceptional service, with prices to match. Guests said it was more relaxing than going abroad, offering luxurious, unforgettable moments. The cuisine was top-notch, and the spa was opulent. Because of this, even those in secret relationships found it the perfect place to enjoy a worry-free, ultra-luxurious spa date. Recently, we even received inquiries from international celebrities. The only reason we secured rooms for this trip was that I was part of the group. Our lodge was famously difficult to book, and the guests who did stay were mostly CEOs, celebrities, and other wealthy individuals. In fact, the wait time for a reservation was 3 years. In other words, this wasn't the kind of place where an average company retreat could typically stay. For 2 nights, the cost per person was $5,000, making the total $50,000 for the 10 of us. Even so, $50,000 was considered a bargain for what we offered. I had already told my brother about how Bob schemed to leave me behind on this trip. They left me behind on purpose. It was all Bob's doing. Please don't let him have a good time. I was looking forward to catching up with you, but to hear this happened, unbelievable. Leave it to me. My brother made sure to get back at Bob on my behalf. When Bob realized the truth, he couldn't hide his shock. You're the heir of such a luxurious lodge? Why didn't you ever mention that? Is that something I need to tell you? It has nothing to do with my work at our company. Just let us stay for one night using your connections. I've been looking forward to this trip for so long. But it wasn't just staying at the luxury lodge that he was excited about. He had also enjoyed leaving me behind and watching me chase after the bus. The company trip was planned for 3 days and 2 nights. If they wanted to follow the schedule, they'd need to find another place to stay for the second night. Remembering how I was humiliated, I responded to Bob. You shouldn't need my connections. Surely my brother, the manager, couldn't possibly overlook your remarkable personality. Are you mocking me? Just get over here and arrange for us to stay now. I stayed silent for a moment, then hung up the phone and blocked Bob's number. As for getting to the location, should I take a train or a plane? I booked the earliest flight for the next day and sent a message to Kevin through an app. I'll head there tomorrow. Kevin replied with a brief, got it. In the end, Bob and his group spent the night in a downtown area, meeting up with the women in the morning. The employees were apparently complaining loudly, trying to figure out whose fault it was that things had gone so wrong. At that moment, I was in a taxi heading to the location from the airport when Kevin video called me. I'll discreetly keep this app open. Everyone's starting to suspect Bob. Thanks to Kevin's quick thinking, I got a live broadcast of Bob being cornered. Wasn't Sean responsible for organizing this trip? Why isn't he here? Sean's a reliable guy. If he weren't coming, he would have made sure to arrange accommodations for us. I actually contacted Sean yesterday, and it sounds like this was Bob's doing. Everyone immediately began questioning Bob. Amused, I watched the chaos unfold from the back seat of the taxi. Even the driver couldn't help but laugh. Realizing he was being live-streamed to me, Kevin put on a more dramatic tone. Sean was told to meet at a completely different location. He said Bob admitted it directly. That's a misunderstanding. I didn't do anything like that. But I saw Sean arrive out of breath. At the time, I thought he had come to see us off because he couldn't join. Why did you rush the driver to leave then? The accusations against Bob continued to pile up. Kevin, speaking clearly to ensure I could hear. Everything, pressed Bob further. Sean's family owns the lodge we were supposed to stay at. Thanks to him, we got a special arrangement for 10 people. Why did you exclude him from the trip? I didn't mean to. Besides, I didn't know the lodge was owned by Sean's family or that it was such a high-end place. That's not an answer. Why do you dislike Sean so much anyway? The murmurs around them grew louder, with more voices criticizing Bob. Kevin pushed even harder. So what's your plan now? Are we supposed to spend another night sleeping outside? If that's the case, I'd rather just go home right now. We came to relax, but this is exhausting and infuriating. Shouldn't we charge Bob for all the money we spent on this trip? Just then, the taxi I was riding in stopped in front of Kevin and the others. I stepped out of the back seat gracefully, right into the middle of the commotion. I raised one hand in acknowledgement to the employees who had noticed me and declared, I apologize for the inconvenience caused by my absence yesterday. I've arranged for all employees except Bob to stay for one more night. Cheers erupted from the employees, and they crowded around me, giving high fives. Seeing Catherine's smile was the biggest relief of all. What was most satisfying, however, was that no one sympathized with Bob completely losing his standing. Bob still complained, why am I the only one who can't stay? If there's another night available, I should be able to stay too. The employees immediately criticized him. This all happened because you left scene behind, didn't it? If there's no place for you, why don't you just head home already? I contacted my brother, who sent a shuttle bus to pick us up. Together with all the employees, except Bob, we headed to the lodge. That night, we had dinner together in the banquet hall. We invited the town's best performers and enjoyed traditional entertainment. This is such a rare experience. I doubt you'll ever have another chance like this. Yeah, the number of traditional performers is dwindling. CEOs of big companies even fly out here just to enjoy this kind of entertainment. Every little gesture they make is so elegant. I wish I could move like that. The banquet continued, and I had the longest conversation I'd ever had with Catherine. Meanwhile, Bob was unable to enter the lodge and spent a second night sleeping outdoors. The next morning, we woke up feeling refreshed and enjoyed a heartfelt breakfast. The meal featured rare and luxurious items you'd never find in the city. Someone teasingly took a photo of the breakfast and sent it to Bob, who quickly replied. Apparently, Bob had settled for some convenience store bread. After leaving the lodge, we went sightseeing. Through this trip, I'd say the bond among our sales team grew even stronger. My brother told me, feel free to use the lodge again any time. So we all talked about returning next year. In the afternoon, we headed to the bus terminal for our scheduled return trip. There, we found Bob, exhausted and sleeping on a bench. Kevin leaned over to me and whispered jokingly, "Should we just leave him here?" "Don't even joke about that. Think about how it feels to be left behind." I approached Bob and gently tapped his shoulder. Bob opened his eyes but didn't seem fully present and avoided looking at me. "Bob, the bus is leaving soon. Let's head back." "I'm not going. If you want to go, go ahead without me." "Are you serious? You don't even have a place to stay, do you?" Bob stood up silently, his face expressionless, and quietly walked away. We couldn't exactly force Bob to come back against his will. As he walked away, with no other choice, we departed as planned. I took a day off and returned to work the following day. However, Bob didn't return to work. The employees began to worry. Bob must have gotten back already, right? He probably took a different bus after ours. After 2 nights of sleeping outside, he's probably sore all over. Maybe he's at a chiropractor, and will come back tomorrow or the day after. Even after 2 more days passed, Bob still hadn't shown up to work or contacted anyone. With no other choice, I called Bob's cell phone, but the person who answered wasn't him. It was a police officer at a local station. At last, we've identified who he is. He's been refusing to speak and had no identification on him. What exactly did Bob do? I never imagined he'd end up in trouble with the police. Actually, he was caught shoplifting and was arrested, the officer explained. According to the officer, Bob had been sleeping outdoors, and at some point, his wallet was stolen. Even though he still had his phone and could have reached out to us for help, he didn't. Perhaps it was a matter of pride, but eventually, he couldn't stand the hunger and tried to take some bread from a convenience store. When he attempted to leave without paying, he was immediately caught by a store clerk. During questioning, Bob refused to explain himself and wouldn't unlock his phone. It was only when I called that he finally unlocked it, but he still refused to talk. That's when the officer answered the phone and explained the situation to me. In any case, we need someone to come and pick him up. We were at a loss. Getting to him would mean taking a flight or a long bus ride again. After discussing it with upper management, it was decided that I would go retrieve him. After completing the necessary paperwork, the 2 of us walked out of the police station together. That was the last time I saw Bob. "Bob, let's at least go back to the office and explain everything." "You aren't heartless." "No, it's over. Everything is finished." Shaking off my hand, Bob walked away, his figure looking smaller than ever. Because he committed a crime during a company-sponsored trip, Bob was dismissed. The one who succeeded Bob as the sales manager was me. Becoming the sales manager gave me a strong sense of confidence. Determined not to let this opportunity pass, I made a bold decision and proposed to Catherine. "Catherine, will you marry me? I promise to make you happy." "Yes, of course." And so we began walking toward our future together. When we visited my family's lodge to share our engagement news, my brother offered a suggestion. "Now that you're married, why not run the lodge together? Catherine could become the future lady. I've never been a company employee, but I think managing the lodge would give you a more fulfilling life than staying in the corporate world." Having left all lodge matters to my brother, I was taken aback by the proposal. Catherine, however, was open-minded. "I don't know if I'm more suited to working at the company or the lodge. Either way is fine with me. The truth is, you can't know what suits you until you try." But I couldn't tie Catherine, who was fresh out of college with little life experience, to the lodge. After several discussions, we decided to continue our careers as company employees. As for Bob, we couldn't help but wonder what had become of him. When one of the employees, who got along relatively well with him, reached out, Bob's voice sounded utterly defeated. He hadn't sought new employment and was living off his savings, which were slowly running out. Eventually, his savings dried up, and he couldn't pay his rent, leading to his eviction. After that, we lost all track of him. According to my brother, a homeless man who closely resembles Bob has been seen around town. A year has passed since then. I married Catherine, and we're both working at the same company. Catherine seems to enjoy her work, and I'm glad I didn't force her into becoming a trainee landlady at the lodge back then. I also find fulfillment in working for the company now. If our perspectives change as we grow older, we can always reconsider our way of life. No matter the circumstances, as long as Catherine is with me, I'll be happy.